like trying to get one line is always the producer's friend. It's absolutely got nothing really to do with the talent.
You remind the director of his niece, and he hates his niece. You can't look older than 25 and play a 48-year-old's wife, because they were full of it.
Double strike. Hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. We have a special guest today, Moira Quirk, who is a transplant from the UK, a very prolific voiceover artist. She has done audio books, video games. You hear her all the time and don't even know it. But she's going to share with us today her experience of how she realized that authority figures weren't always the people who knew what was best for her, and how, as an artist and a mum, she's listened to her intuitive voice, which has guided her for the better choices in life. All right, well, we'll get to our first question. How would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
I would describe it as assertive. And I would describe it as not a normal relationship with food. Normally, I think your relationship with food is sort of a dance, a give back and forth, whereas a banana is kind of like an overeager boyfriend that's lovable but kind of terrible and over-asserts itself. It's not a balanced relationship. I don't like bananas. Can you tell?
I can. You're one of the few people who don't like them.
I find them comical. They're lovely to look at. They promise surprise and fun, and yet they're too yielding. They're soft in a way that a potato, similar, goes a bit powdery, perhaps, or sort of waxy. A banana goes gelatinous, and I can't approve of that.
So often when people describe a banana, it could be the way that they describe what they look for in a significant other.
Yeah.
And with that,
I would say not a banana. What I look for in a significant other is not a banana. Yeah.
He'll be delighted he made the cut of not being gelatinous.
Yeah, not gelatinous, not a banana. Comical.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yes.
Right. So tell me about your first perception change you became aware of when you were younger.
Ooh, gosh, I have to pick one.
Well, pick the earliest one. That's what I'm interested in, the first one first.
Okay, well, there's revelations, and then there's sort of crises. And okay, so revelatory, and just a simple revelation, was probably right after I'd finished my finals at university. So this is sort of like mid in my time span, my lifespan. Well, not mid. I'm not that young. But I remember, I had finished finals, so I'd come out of that sort of miasma of finals. Had to go to see my bank manager to talk about my overdraft. Will Americans understand that? It means I had less money in my bank than I should have. And I remember, and I'd had such sort of an academic childhood. I loved school. I'd just been in university, and people talked to me from behind lecterns with expertise. They talked to me from behind desks with expertise. They stood in front of, overhead projectors and pointed at it with expertise. And all of a sudden, I realized that this man who was just wobbling on at me about stuff, I realized, oh my God, you're a moron and you're boring. And as my child would say, and you're basic. I'm not saying that to
is this about
people
the bank manager?
Yeah, I'm not saying, yeah, he was pretty basic. And I suddenly realized, just because you sit behind a desk does not mean you have expertise or actual authority based on merit. And that was big for me.
So that's another level from the premise of don't judge a book by its cover or preconceived ideas. based on the outsides.
Yes, I think so. And I have such joy in other people's expertise. I really do like to defer to expertise. I find it very reassuring and relaxing that I can, go to my doctor and just go, you're in charge, or somebody else. And so that really kind of threw me, that I had to sort of be aware of falsity and fakeness.
Did it then have you backtrack, sort of looking back maybe at other key figures in your childhood who,
I think that still took me a lot longer. Because I would say I did have another crisis in my education when I was choosing my GCSEs, my O levels, and I really, really, really wanted to take German. I loved German. The German teacher was lovely, Herr Jones. He was very nice. I think he'd taken tetracycline in his youth because he had ginger sideburns. I'm so aging myself. That was a thing people had, and my stepfather was having none of it. It was physics or nothing. And I was already taking quite advanced mathematics, so I didn't want to do anything. I was doing theoretical mechanics in maths, and I didn't want to do any more of that. I really wanted to take German, but I was really bullied. And the person who would be teaching me was a teacher who absolutely hated me for no good reason. And it was only later I realized, I was talking with a school friend. We're still very good friends. And she goes, yeah, he was a nasty piece of work. And so that was a relief as well to know, everything that I felt about this adult was actually true. He was just unhappy and a nasty piece of work. Yeah.
Was it an ultimatum that you take this course or you'll be kicked out? Or was it an influence that you chose that option just because you wanted an easier life?
Well, I very much obeyed my parents. I've talked about how I love authority, or deferring to, not so much there. I just knew my life would be miserable unless I did what I was told. Yeah, It was a pick your battles thing. So we did actually have a, what do you call it? We had a compromise, and I instead took computer studies. And everything I learned, like the German language, since I was in school, has probably changed a little. Some more words have been added. Absolutely everything has changed about what I learned in computer studies. I wasn't going to be a coder. I just wasn't. I wanted to be in theatre. So it was stupid for me to take that. And I regret to this day my lack of knowledge in German.
Do you think that if you'd taken that, would it have made a difference where you went on with your further education because you would have got a better grade or anything?
No, I did very well in computer studies. But I would have been happier, and I would have known German, and I loved it. Yeah. I don't know if this is a helpful story for anyone or just me bitching later.
This is your perception. So you then realized about other authority figures that maybe they don't know as much as they portray that they do, and also your own intuition was spot on.
I think that is it, is that as you get older, hopefully, and more secure in your choices, that I do think you have to be intuitive about yourself. Yeah.
So were there any other moments that you really made a choice based on your intuition and you still had that voice saying, I don't know, Moira, I don't know, but then you're like, yes, that was the right choice to make?
I think, yes. I think I've always, maybe since then, just chosen what I wanted to do, whether it seemed sensible or not. I think anyone who works in the arts really just has to have that sort of faith. And I think it gives you, I think working in the arts gives you a much more sensible view of the world, that you don't get your degree and your husband and your 2.5 children and your car and your house, and then you set forth on the road of life and it's straight, and you have, you know, you go from here to there. At any point, anyone can be fired. At any point, anyone can die. We can all die. It can all just end. And I think,
well, that's guaranteed.
Yeah. So I think when you work in a business where your job ends at the end of every day, and it's accepted that being fired is quite usual, or not even getting the job to begin with, I think it sets you up for life quite well to be knocked about and bounce around.
And yet with that, you do have all those so-called normal boxes checked, don't you? You do have the house and the 2 kids.
Me? Yeah, I do. So look at that. What a winner. I mean, yeah, it is funny. And honestly, I mean, I've done some cool things and worked with cool people, but everything that's important to me is incredibly conventional. My children, my husband, being married, buying a house, getting a washing machine.
Was that the way when you were younger? Did you have that same perception?
No, because everything was all a bit, I didn't have that as a child. You know, it was, you don't know. I don't know why I said that. Yeah, I had a very solitary childhood until my brother was born when I was 12. And I had 2 parents who were, I suppose, a bit of their time that, you know, just left me to it. I was just never bothered. They never bothered with my education, or, I mean, apart from what I just told you, which was such a surprise. Just, oh, all of a sudden you're interested in me taking physics. Curious. But yeah, I had a I don't know, a not settled childhood, let's say. We moved around a lot, didn't have much money. Stepfather left when I was 16. He was nasty, and just got on with it. Yeah.
And how was your move to America implemented? Like, what was the...
Oh God, I, you know, I'd always known, and I loved, you know, because I loved reading and I loved English literature and I just loved sort of academics, and I knew I didn't want to end up in my small town working in a shoe shop. And that really could have been my path in that period of time in the UK. And I always wanted to go to university. And I did.
And then was that a stretch from where you were growing up for someone to go to university?
I would say within my small coterie of friends, we did all go off to university, but in the scheme of things, and in the UK at that time, I'd say like 2% of people went really to university rather than polytechnic. I think a college friend of mine just sent me this article, and the year I went to university, 83,000 men went to university and 73,000 women. So it just, you know, it just wasn't the same. Everyone in America, you go to college, but it wasn't the same. It's nice in a way that you can go to trade school or just work and get some experience before going off to uni. But yeah, it's just a different mindset. But I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I was very fortunate in teachers who absolutely encouraged it and expected it of us. Yeah.
Now, being very academic, was it a shock to them that you wanted to go into the arts?
No, they'd always seen me. From my earliest youth, I'd sort of done school plays and sketches and always asked can we read this out? Can we act this out? And that had always been, and I had very obliging teachers who were aware of that. And we had a school production each year in the schools I went to. Yeah.
And it was very much the idea that you'd go away and then you'd do reps. So how old were you when you moved to the States?
I was 21. Yeah, it was right after university.
And you came out here because?
I came out here because it was actually a terrible recession when I graduated. And the thing was, I'd always had this plan to go to university. I didn't have a plan after that. So we stopped and I just went, oh, I've done that. Now what? And there really, I was just so clueless as to how to live life. Because because university, in a way, it's like that transitional time to move from, and I couldn't go home. I was just going to be a burden. And I didn't have the wherewithal to know how to go about getting a job that I could cover my costs for, straight out of, and I also at my college, it was university and central school, and I hadn't really enjoyed central school. I thought they were full of it. And I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to act anymore. I thought they were full of it because they were full of it.
Double strike.
Yeah. So yeah, their expertise, I very much questioned. It's a very different program now, I think. But then I was just like, oh, for God's sake, you bunch of wankers. I just all thought they had their heads up their asses. And they really phoned it in for my particular program. Central school phoned in dial-up style.
So how did you get to America? It
so
sounds
then
like it was a very long boat ride.
Sorry, so I just went, oh no, and I had a grandmother in Florida. I said, I'm going to come and visit you. So I just packed my suitcase and I left. It was that quick. I'm going to spend a couple of weeks and just think about what's what and just have some thoughtful time. And here I am. It's not 2 weeks later. It's
not
many
2 weeks
years.
later. Yeah. A few decades.
Yeah.
And that was quite common, if it's okay to say, the Gen X experience of going to university and then having that drop. Where nowadays it's quite common for people to crash either in their high school senior years or the first year of college or university. It's slightly changed, but that whole, Reality Bites movies that came out, it was very much about the Gen X went to university and then had the crash afterwards.
Yeah, so I would say, yes, that was definitely a crisis of just, I have no clues right here. Nothing. So I'm just going to get on a plane and go somewhere and think about something different. Yeah.
And when you were there, did it become a revelation you were going to stay, or was it simply a byproduct of one event after another? And
it was one event. It was a creeping staying there. Yeah. Because the first thing I did, because I went from London to Orlando, Florida. So it was just such absolute culture shock. And my mother's American, but still, I just had no way of just fitting in, and just realizing maybe a year or two later, no one had understood a word I'd said for maybe a year, that there was just a lot of nodding and isn't she cute? I think she's English.
So tell me some experiences that you thought that they were understanding you and they weren't.
Well, I suppose because then I went to work. Well, I worked at Sears behind a counter selling jewelry because I'd heard of Sears. Went, well, there's a shop I've heard of, and I went and applied there and just got sort of like a seasonal job. And then I worked at Universal Studios Florida, and I think there everyone just smiled at me because I was like this little English thing, but they had no idea what I was saying, but they sort of liked me being around. I think that was it. I don't have a particular story. Sometimes there was a what, sometimes they were clear that way, but otherwise no. I mean, it was a long time ago, so I can't really remember specifics, but yeah.
And when did you have the realization that no one understood what you were saying?
You've just asked that, and I don't know. I just realized.
You never had a moment where you realized they didn't know what I was saying for a year?
Yeah, after a year, when I'd started to sort of get more of the American lexicon, or I suppose maybe I'd slowed down my speech, or I was able to banter enough that they would say, what? To me, and give me at least that. So then I could say, oh, well, this is this. I remember I had worked for Nickelodeon. After I worked for Universal, I worked for Nickelodeon, and I did a TV show for them. And one time on air, I'd called the host a bit of a goon, and because he was goofing about, like, and the executive producer came down. He goes, "That was very harsh, Maura." And I said, "What? You calling Mike a goon? Isn't that harsh?" And I went, "Is it?" And in hockey, a goon is a real thug. It is a sports term, I learned, but I, of course, meant Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan and Harry Bell, whatever, Harry Seacombe from The Goon Show, a particularly silly comedy troupe, sort of, who precursed Monty Python in that sort of vein. And that's when I realized, oh yeah, things can get really weird. Like, just the other day, I said something about hard graft, and people were like, "Huh?" And it's just so weird that it means hard work in the UK, and it just means, like, swindling people left and right in the US.
And yet you still stayed.
And I stayed because I kept getting work. And then I met my husband, and we did plays together, and I did improv, and then we decided we had to leave Orlando, as most sensible people do.
Yikes. And so from that, had you been surprised that you met him so young and you expected?
Yes, I was very angry about it. I was supposed to have sort of Mary Tyler Moore 20s, I thought, or just like loose, carefree. But then and there was this realization, I think, when, God, I don't know. And I did have a bit of a crisis then, because I kind of looked at him and went, "Oh, God, it's you, isn't it? It's bloody you. It's you. I've met you." And I kind of knew that meant I wouldn't be going back to England. Yeah. And that was hard, just making that discovery and decision at the same time. It was a discover-cision. Yeah.
The discover-cision was before you actually moved from Florida?
Yes. And then we did some theatre across Canada. We did a lot of the Fringe Festival tours. So we did a lot of those venues, and ended up, we thought we were going to end up in Atlanta, but he had a contract there that fell through, and then we just stayed with our friends in LA. And here we are.
And here you are. Now, when you came to Los Angeles, did you have a perception of how it was going to be?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like LA Law. I thought it was going to be all like downtown with sky rises and people with, padded shoulders being efficient. And it's actually quite suburban a lot. Maybe it's just because I ended up in the valley. I remember we had finally gotten our apartment, and we watched Pulp Fiction, and there's a scene, I think, when they've blown the kid's head off and they're looking for, "We got to find a safe house." And then the guy shouts, "There's no safe houses in the valley." And I kind of put both my hands up and went, "Yeah!" Because we're in Squaresville. I want to be in a place where there's no safe houses for people who've shot off kids' heads. That seems a good place to be.
So definitely wanting to have more stability. You found yourself in an environment where it was more stable, and raising your children has been in a very stable environment, the two of you.
Yes. As my husband always creeps up behind me as our children were growing up, and he would say, "Are you overcompensating?" And I'd say, "Yeah." Yeah, I am. It's all about them.
And did you have other ideas of how LA would be when you came out here pursuing your career in the arts?
Yeah, I mean, you always sort of, there was sort of an English idea of LA, which I just think gets sort of encompassed in the idea of America.
Which is?
Glam and excessive, and people are fake, and then my sort of Orlando idea was that you go there and that there's shows to be had, and just to be seen by a casting director, how golden must that be? And then you turn up and you can just basically you can get a commercial agent, and you can get at that time you could make a few phone calls, get a commercial agent, and then you could just start going on commercials, and you would be with people who could be kind of crap. And that was sort of like my bank manager story all over again. Yeah. And
Right.
yeah, and that as long as you accept that there's a lot of people bullshitting, that there's immense talent and there's immense bullshit here, as long as you accept that, then you're good.
I think from my own personal experience being in England and then coming to Los Angeles, there was so much shallow content seen on the box, as it were, and people not necessarily very good or even believable, that it would be, well, it's going to be easy to get work because if you actually know what you're doing, you must really stand out. And the reality is it's completely the opposite.
Yeah.
Like trying to get one line is always the producer's friend, or they need a look, or someone can't contrast with someone. It's absolutely got nothing really to do with the talent. It
is actually very reassuring when you realize once you accept that how little control you have over it, that maybe you were the best person for the maybe you just knocked it out of the park with an audition, but you weren't the right height, or maybe you knocked it out, but you remind the director of his niece and he hates his niece, or you remind them of a wife or an ex-girlfriend, or you won't date them, or you don't seem like, a lot of times, like when I first started, I started realizing if you didn't seem available, then that wasn't a good thing. Like if you mentioned a boyfriend or a significant other or a husband, you suddenly seemed less usable because you weren't there for them to mold in your entirety. So that I think that's something that women have to deal with. And then you realize for women too, that oftentimes you'll look and you'll see like age discrepancies, like you can't be older than 25 to play a 15-year-old's mother, or you can't look older than 25 and play a 48-year-old's wife. There's all of that goes on as well. But I think as soon as you realize how little control you have and all you can do is just go in and give your best idea of what an audition of what a character would be, and just say screw it and then go home.
How do you remember a specific moment where that really sunk in? You have no control.
Yeah, I think I got told one time, you were the best, you were the absolute best, and we all loved you, but the person who got hired, they've just gone through a really difficult time and they need this. Okay.
So having come from an unstable upbringing and being in the arts where jobs come and go, how do you have any grounding practices or anything you do to surrender the fact that you're not in control?
Yeah, I think, what do? I mean, it's not that I don't get upset sometimes. I have disappointments. I'm human. But generally, I do take, before I go to bed every night, or as I'm sitting in bed, I do take an inventory of the day. And I do make sure that every day I am grateful. And it's not hard. It's not hard to be grateful. I find that very easy. Yeah, so I'll sort of go through and think about the day and what I was happy for, what could I have done differently. I really do think about my day at the end of each day. Yeah, and sort of I suppose like go through the dailies. I go through my dailies.
Go through your dailies or your rushes, and see and sort of evaluate. When did you start doing that?
When did I start doing that? I kind of think I might have always done that. Well, I suppose there was a time, I think definitely once I had children, even though going to bed was a much different experience. But in my 20s, I would say. Yeah.
So the self-reflection was always there, going inward, having a look at what occurred in the day, where I might have been off, or why am I bothered by this so much, or is there anything that needs to be amended or shifted, that kind of thing.
I'm quite a private person, and I have such a horror of writing a journal because I don't want anything committed to paper, because things on paper seem very important to me and I don't want it there. And so I think I went through something more ephemeral that I can sort of erase and start again each day. Yeah. A daily inventory of gratitude and work, and a to-do list and to be worked on.
Well, I myself also do have a writing practice that I do in the morning and then the afternoon, usually before I meditate, to help sort of get anything assessed. And there are other individuals who also do that, do this practice. And if you want to find out a little bit about that, we have an ebook, so it's not on paper. Vedic meditation stories. And if you have Amazon Prime right now, you do get a Kindle ebook free per month. So it's completely free. And if you open it up, the number of pages that are read through give credit towards the nonprofit. It's Vedic meditation stories. And it has true stories of people who learned meditation and how they helped themselves get grounded and the differences that it made in their life. And many of them are from underrepresented groups in wellness, which is part of the mission statement for Aware Meditation Inc. And you can check that all out down there in the box below. So if you've enjoyed our little chat today, please like and subscribe, or even better, share. And we'll see you again. And thank you so much, Maura, for joining us on our next Cosmic Chat.